It's July in Harlan, Kentucky, and I'm walking down Main Street at 9 in the morning, trying to get to the gas station before anyone sees me. Too late. Mrs. Denton is already on her porch with a cup of coffee, and what I can only describe as the world's most satisfied expression, like she'd been sitting there all week just waiting for me to walk by. "Caleb," she calls out. "Heard about the science fair?" I wave. Keep moving. Because what do you say to that? 3 weeks earlier, I was the kid everyone in Harlan counted on. State science fair, first place, full scholarship to the University of Kentucky. That was the plan. My plan, my mother's plan, my guidance counselor's plan, and the plan of every teacher who'd ever written a recommendation letter with my name on it. I walked into that auditorium in Louisville with a water purification project I'd been building since October. 200 kids, 6 judges, 1 shot. And I froze. Not nervous froze, not butterflies froze. I'm talking stood at the podium for 11 full seconds without making a sound froze. One of the judges cleared his throat. So I said thank you and walked off the stage. Dead last, out of 200 kids. On the drive back home, I told myself it didn't matter. Small towns have short memories, right? People would find something new to talk about within a week. That was 6 weeks ago. Harlan had not found something new to talk about. Every time I walked into Dale's diner, conversations shifted just a little too obviously. The guys I played baseball with stopped texting as much, and my own cousin, told me at a 4th of July cookout that maybe college wasn't for everybody. I started sleeping until noon just to shorten the day. My plan was simple. Keep my head down, get through summer, and prove everyone wrong in September when I applied anyway. I figured if I could just outlast the noise, just wait it out long enough, it would eventually stop. But nobody tells you this about small towns. The noise doesn't stop, it just changes frequencies. The only person who hadn't said a single word about any of it was my grandfather, Frank. He lived 20 minutes out on Route 9 on a piece of land that hadn't changed since 1987. Frank was a man of maybe 40 words a day, and he spent most of them talking to his 3-legged beagle, Corporal. He called me one Tuesday morning and said, "Come out here, I need help with something." I didn't ask what. With Frank, you just showed up. When I got there, he was standing in the side yard with 2 iron horseshoe stakes driven 40 feet apart into the dry July dirt. A bucket of shoes sat between them. I picked them up. They were heavier than I remembered. Frank had taught me to throw when I was 11, so I figured this was just something to do with an afternoon. I wasn't thinking much of it. We threw for a while. My shots were drifting left, landing short. Frank wasn't saying anything, just watching. Then his neighbor, Roy Tillis, wandered over from across the fence. Then Roy's son. Then 2 guys from the shop down the road who were supposedly fixing Roy's truck. Within 15 minutes, there were 5 people leaning on that fence, watching me miss. And Roy, God bless Roy, said loudly enough for the whole yard to hear, "This is the kid who froze up at that science thing?" My next throw bounced 8 feet short of the stake. Frank walked over slowly, picked up a horseshoe, and held it out to me. "Tell me what you see between your hand and that stake." I looked at him. "What?" "Everything between your hand and that stake. Tell me." I scanned the yard. Grass, about 40 feet of it. The stake. "That's it?" "Yeah." He nodded once. "Throw it." I threw it. 6 inches from the stake. Close, but not there. "What did you look at?" he asked. "The stake. But then Roy said something and I—" Frank raised one hand, slow and patient. "Then you weren't looking at the stake." He handed me another shoe. The guys at the fence were still talking. Roy said something that made the others laugh. I felt heat climb up the back of my neck. My grip tightened around the iron. Frank stood right beside me and said, just for me, "What's between your hand and that stake?" So I looked. Really looked. The grass was dry and brown from the heat. There were 3 dandelions growing near the midpoint. The stake was iron, slightly rusted at the top, leaning just a degree or two to the right. I saw all of it. Only that. I threw. The horseshoe hit the stake dead center and wrapped around it with a sound like a church bell. Nobody said anything for a second. And right there, standing in my grandfather's side yard with iron dust on my hands and Roy Tillis suddenly very quiet at the fence, something shifted inside me. I hadn't blocked them out. I hadn't gritted my teeth or told myself not to listen. I'd just found something more real to look at. Something true. And next to that, their voices simply didn't have anywhere to live. I used to think focus was about willpower, about building a wall between yourself and everything that wants to tear you down. But Frank taught me something different that afternoon. Focus isn't a wall you build, it's a direction you choose. I went home and spent the next 3 weeks rebuilding my project, not to prove anyone wrong, but because I genuinely cared about the problem it was built to solve. I stopped checking who was talking about me. I stopped rehearsing arguments in my head at 2 in the morning. I applied to UK in September. I got in on academic merit. Frank never made a big thing of what happened that afternoon. He just picked up the bucket, said, "Stay for dinner," and walked inside. But I think about what he gave me that day more than I can say. Not a lesson, not a lecture, not even advice really. Just a direction to look. And everything else became background noise.
If this story lit something up in you, even just a quiet flicker, share it with someone whose light has gone a little dim. Subscribe to this channel and come back in a couple of days. There are more stories where this one came from.